Salvite. Here, guys, I'm going to walk you through the notes for Chapter 12. Chapter 12, you guys already went through the vocab. It introduces the perfect, which we already learned before the National Latin exam. And then what's new is the remaining tenses in Latin, the pluperfect and the future perfect tense. Okay? These are very easy tenses, so this should be quick. These tenses all stem from the third principal part of a verb. All right, principal parts. You've been learning them all year. I give you some examples. Amo, amare, amawi, amatum, to love. Amawi, in the third principal part, its sole purpose is to be able to create these tenses, these verb tenses. All right, and then just another example, do, dari, dedi, datum. And that's why you study principal parts, because dedi becomes the stem for creating these verb tenses. All right, so I highlighted those. There's just two of the verbs that we've studied the principal parts for. Every time you learn a new verb, you should know its principal parts. All right, the perfect tense as a review. Okay, it translates as has or have, or just simple past. I'm going to add that in here. Or simple past. And that just means like, walk is the present tense. I walked to the store, or I walked. Okay, walked would be the simple past. Perfect implies you completed it. All right, the endings are I, isti, it, emis, istis, erunt, and I attach them to the third principal part, stem, of the verb to love. And what I mean by stem is basically everything but the I. Okay, the I that's on every third principal part, if you look it up on either a vocab list or in the dictionary, is this ending right here. So everything but that ending is considered the stem. Because when you get down here, there's no I. And you can see that here because you're taking the I away. That I is an ending. And then you're adding a runt, which is the ending for the third person plural. So this would translate as they have loved, or they loved. Okay, hope you followed me on that. All right, let's go to the pluperfect. Now, the pluperfect is nice and easy. It always translates as had. It has no option. It is always had. Okay. Pluperfect equals had. All right, it's the furthest back in the past you can go. It's the third principal part stem, which I said earlier, you use for all these tenses. And you add these endings. And this chart might look familiar. This chart, arama, ras, arat, and ramus, eratus, erant, is the imperfect of to be. But here, as endings, and you can see I put them on the verb to love here. I've used the third principal part stem. So instead of ama, we, I take the I away and I add these endings, ama or ram, and that would translate as I had loved. I had loved. All right. Plu just means like it's a weird prefix. It means like you've really done it. So pluperfect just means really completed. So I had loved. It's the furthest back in the past you can go, and you just add these endings right onto the third principal part. That's the key to this lesson. And then the rarest tense and the final of the 6 verb tenses is the future perfect. It means future completed. Translates as will have. Okay, and it is, you take the third principal part, stem, of course, add that in, and you add ero, eris, erit, eremus, eritus, erint. And so that chart might look familiar. That's the future tense of to be, but it is usually ends in a runt. You don't do a runt because if you go back here, a runt is used in the perfect tense. So you actually do a rint here. You rarely see this tense ever in anything written in Latin, but it exists, so we have to cover it. You take the third principal part, stem, once again, amawi, you take the I away, and you add these endings. So ero, eris, erit, eremus, eritus, erint. So amawero would translate as I will have loved. All right? I will have loved. All right, so that's the future perfect. Like I said, very rare, but it's the 6th and last tense. There's the present, the imperfect, the future. which we've covered, and the perfect, the pluperfect, and the future perfect. Okay, here now I'm highlighting the verb to be. Now the verb to be, if you remember, its principal parts are sum, esse, fui, and then futurum, which we won't get to in Latin 1, but fui is the third principal part of to be. So the perfect tense and all these tenses stem from that. So you see fu, which always gets a chuckle in class, but as the stem. So fui would translate as I have been, or you could say I was. You have been, he, she, it has been, we have been, you have been, they have been. Now the pluperfect works the same way. We're still taking that third principal part stem, which is fu. Fuaram, I had been, you had been, he, she, it had been, we had been, you had been, they had been, and then the future perfect, we're working the same way here. Fuaro, I will have been, you will have been, and so on. So the verb to be, it's not really irregular in these tenses. You're just doing what you would do for any verb. You're taking the third principal part and you're adding the endings, the same endings that you've added for any verb up here. So what's nice about these tenses is conjugation doesn't really matter. We've used amo, but any conjugation verb, all you do is you take whatever the third principal part is and you add the endings, okay? A lot of first conjugation verbs have a V, but third conjugation verbs and fourth conjugation verbs, they're all different. They all have different third principal parts. That's why you study third principal parts when you learn vocab. And you just take whatever that is, you take the I away, and you add these endings that creates these tenses. So not bad. You don't have to worry about what conjugation the verb is. If you're given the principal parts, you just take the third principal part and add the appropriate ending, and it creates the appropriate translation. All right. We've already learned the perfect, the pluperfect, really important in Latin. Plu equals had. All right. Okay, that's it. There'll be some charts for you to do, and I hope you all are well.